Okay, let's look at one of the more exciting features of this week, OS Walk. I say exciting, if this kind of thing floats your boat. Um, OS Walk allows us to traverse an entire directory tree, giving us access to every file and directory within the tree. What is a directory tree? Well, as I mentioned earlier, and as you know, your file system consists of folders within folders within folders within folders. It's actually quite a complex nesting of folders within folders, and you can think of that as a tree, in the same way that a tree has branches that lead to smaller branches that lead to twigs that lead to leaves. You could think of you could think of leaves as being the files, but you also have to imagine that a leaf could grow out of any branch, any folder, because, of course, every folder contains files and folders. So, what does it mean to traverse an entire directory tree? Well, imagine that you wanted to get through a set of folders that are nested within one another. Over here on the left here, you can see I've created a tree of folders and files. I've put different files within different folders that are within other folders, and you can see how the nesting works. Tester contains one folder, a subdirectory. That subdirectory contains two other subdirectories. So this is a very small little directory tree that I want to be able to traverse so I can show you what's in there. This directory tree is reachable. Now you could do this yourself, presumably, if you listed out a directory and then for every directory that you find, you list that directory. You'd probably have to use a technique called recursion in order to do that. Fortunately, we have OS Walk to traverse the tree for us. So I'm going to begin by just printing the base. We'll get to the files in a moment and the directories in a moment. The base, what does it mean to have a base? If you look closely here at OS Walk, and you need to use it this way, we're going to start with the current directory, that is the present working directory, and we're going to loop through each of the directories within. So when I say, so you can see what we're doing here, it's actually pretty unusual. We haven't seen this before for base files dirs in OS Walk. Now I'm going to focus on base. Let's just focus on base for right now. And look at what base is when I run this program. Okay. Now these are pretty long, and actually I see a lot of them involve venv, and I actually don't want to go into venv because venv is very complex. So I'm going to take venv out of the mix. In fact, I'm going to use tester because that's my made up folder set, and we can see what's in there. There we go. Tester, testers test subdir, test subdirs has subsubdir, and subsubdir 2. You can see that it reflects the structure on the left. What OS Walk is doing is visiting each of these directories. One by one, and with each iteration of OS Walk, it jumps to the next directory and shows us the base of that directory. Now this means that we can traverse any directory tree within our system. If our directory tree is pretty low down on the scale, we're going to see a pretty long listing. Let's see what it does for us if I just put in my own home directory. Now I have hundreds and hundreds of directories within my home directory because I've had this computer for a long time, for about 1.5 years, and I'm an IT guy. That means that I've got hundreds of directories. And you can see it takes a while even for Python to get through them all. Not only have I created my own directories, but take a look at what you're seeing here. Oh, we saw it earlier on. I installed Anaconda Python, which is a big installation into my home directory. That means that if I ask Python to loop through all the directories within my home directory, it's got a lot of directories to visit. In fact, it would be interesting to see just how many there are. I'll just go ahead and oops. And at the end, I can just print out dir count to see the result. That's going to be a lot, and we're going to have to run that one. Again, there's many directories that I never created. They're part of a package that I installed that involves a bunch of directories. But if you give it enough time, it'll get through all of them, and it's even counting them up. So it should be interesting to see just how many there are in my home directory. 40,000 directories within my own home directory. Of course, I'm not going to do it here, but if I chose to loop through my entire file system, it wouldn't necessarily be able to visit every folder because some of the folders are restricted. I don't necessarily have permissions to visit every folder on my Unix file system or my Mac file system, but it would still visit all the directories that I could visit, and it would count them up, which would be pretty interesting to see just how many there are on my entire file system. So you can see that within OS Walk, we have a lot of options. There are a lot of things that we can do when we're trying to list out files and folders within our system. Now let's get back to the basics. We're listing out a test directory, which has some other directories within it. And in fact, there are some files within it as well. What we have in base, files, and dirs are a string, a list, and another list. Now that's pretty strange because we've never looped through anything that just didn't deliver us single items. We might loop through a list and get back integers. We might loop through a list and get back strings. Or we might loop through a file and get back strings. Or loop through a directory and get back strings. Whatever those things are, they're usually, they've all, up to now just been strings, integers, and floats. What we're looking at now, though, is that every time we loop through an iteration of OS Walk, we're getting back a string, a list, and another list. Let me show you. And in fact, I'm going to put in a print statement right here just so we can see them separately. Fortunately, there aren't a lot here, so it's going to happen quickly. What this is showing us is that within the base directory testdir, we have a file testsubdir. Oh, interesting. I made a mistake. It's base dirs and files. Whoops. That's interesting. Let's run this again. Okay. Now, within testdir, we have three files, a hidden file, dsstore, and test1 and test2. And if you look closely, that's the case. There's testsubdir, there's test1, there's test2. And the reason we're not seeing dsstore is because it's hidden. Then, OS Walk traverses to the testsubdir. The base directory of that is testdir test/testsubdir. Within that directory, there is dsstore, sub1, and sub2, and the two directories testsubsubdir and testsubsubdir2. Then OS Walk iterates again, traversing to the next directory. This next directory is this one, testsubsubdir. And you can see that there are two files in there and no directories in there. It continues on as it goes through every single subdirectory in the tree. This is the last subdirectory in the tree. It's called testsubsubdir2. And you can see it has two files in it and no directories. So what we're able to do in looping through all of these things is look at the base directory that we've currently traveled to. That is, OS Walk, of course, is jumping between each of this directory, and this directory. And then within each of those directories, it's showing us the files and directories that are inside that directory. We can get an output that just shows, let's say, just all the files in this by looping through the files. We might do this. We could say for this file, let's say for item in files, if OS path is file item, fpath equals OS path join base and item and print fpath. Now, you might want to consider what this all means based on what we've learned, because we've learned several things together. I'm going to run this really quickly to show it to you. Oh, that didn't really work. I wonder why not. I see. I had to experiment, and I actually didn't take my own advice. It didn't work because I didn't join the path to the file, the folder to the file, before I checked to see if it was a file. Here I just want to list out all the files within the subdirectory, and there they all are. There's tester test1, tester test subdir dstore. In fact, I could go ahead and print out the directories as well. Now I'm going to be listing out all the directories and all the files that are within this tree. Now you'll want to look at this and make sure that it all makes sense to you. I have found that a number of people takes a couple of tries to get it. The basic idea though, and this is the part that is most confusing, base is a string, dirs is a list of directories within this base directory, and files is a list of files within this base directory. Again, OSWalk is not looping through each file or each directory. It is looping through each directory in the tree. So I should take that back. It's not looping through each file. It's not looping through a listing within each directory. It is looping through each directory within the tree, which means that if we give it tester, we're going to find that it's going to iterate 1, 2, 3 times only, because it's iterating only through, or maybe it's 4 times. In fact, let's see what the first loop is. The first loop is in test dir subdir. Maybe I need to print base first. That might be part of it as well. Let's see. So yeah, I guess it's iterating 5 times. The root directory that we give to it, which we called search dir, test subdir, that's 2, 3, 4. 4 times. OSWalk is iterating 4 times only. Not through each file, but only through tester, then test subdir, then test subsubdir, then test subsubdir 2. It's iterating over each folder because it wants to give us access to the contents of each folder. The way it does that is by delivering for each iteration over each directory, the base directory where we are at currently, the list of directories within that directory, and the list of files within that directory. It does take a couple of tries sometimes to understand this, so you would want to look at this example and make sense of it before using it. What I'm doing is, for each base directory that we visit, and again, we're only visiting these 4, for each one of these 4 directories, I'm listing out the directories in that directory, and I'm listing out the files within that directory. And I guess this doesn't make sense to put is file because I actually know that it is a file.